Howdy all, this is Shane and I'm here to talk about some of the amplifiers I've owned over the years and each of the amplifiers' pros and cons. Now, a lot of questions I get is about the Peavey Delta Blues. Now, this is a great amp if you want to gig. That's the best thing about it. If you can play in a venue or a club or whatever where you can actually crank this thing up above 12 o'clock on the volume, you're going to get a lot out of this amp and you're going to get good tone at a reasonable price. That's also another one of its good factors, is it's cheap. It has reverb, it has tremolo built in, and it's 2 channels with a boost switch. You can get a lot out of this amp in terms of tone, anything from a really nice clean tone all the way to a clean on the edge to an overdriven sound to a moderate gain setting on the drive channel. If you dime the clean channel, it sounds pretty cool, and it's at a volume though that's quite loud, so you have to have this amp at a place where you can get the most out of its volume. I think the cons of this amp is definitely the tweed covering that my friend Rick loves. It peels off. That's one of the cheapest tweed jobs I've ever seen. It's like just a vinyl tweed. It's pretty bad. And another really bad thing about this amp is the reverb. 1 in 3 almost is faulty if you turn the reverb up past 12 o'clock on the modern Peavey Delta Blues amps. You can get this like oscillation hum, and I've actually got a video on that on YouTube as well. You can check that out. I had lots and lots of problems. Peavey, I guess, are aware of this problem. The noise in the circuit creates a hum that's magnified by the volume of the amplifier rattling the actual reverb tank. And it's not just as simple as padding out the tank or changing the tank. There's actually other issues at play here. Make sure if you're going to get one of these things, turn the volume up to halfway, turn the reverb up to halfway, and tap the top and see if it makes this oscillation noise. If it does, don't buy it. I learned my lesson there. I did get it fixed in the end, but they actually replaced the whole amplifier. So there you go. Another thing I don't really like about the Delta Blues is the tremolo. I mean, it's usable and you can get an okay sound out of it, but comparing it to any other amp, it's pretty awful. It really is. It does the job, but it sounds very, very optical. So I don't know how else to explain that. It sounds digital and crap. It sounds nothing like a Vox trem. The Vox has one of the best tremolos I've ever heard. The Delta Blues is exact opposite of that spectrum. While you can get some usability out of it, it's pretty bad. What actually happens is, instead of the trem, say your volume's here, instead of the trem going above the volume, below the volume, it's going under, back, under, back, under, back. So it feels like you're losing volume. That's one thing about that tremolo I don't like. But to, end on a positive note, they're fairly cheap, they're not that heavy, they sound good. With the exception of the reverb and also the tremolo. And I'm not going to say like all of these Peavey Delta Blues are faulty. A lot of the older ones are fine. People don't have these problems. I've just seen in the last 2 years, from my experience, I've owned 2 of these amps. They've both had the same problem. Another friend of mine has it. He has the same problem. So the trick is to turn the reverb quite down. That said, it's definitely not as nice as a Fender reverb. Maybe someone could mod it out somehow. In terms of a blues amplifier, they're great. They sound good with pedals. They record relatively well. I think they sound better in a mix than on their own. If you just A/B it with a Fender on its own, you'll probably find the Fender's going to sound nicer to the ear. And that's most people's opinion, not necessarily mine or anybody else's. It's when you hear a Peavey Delta Blues in a band situation is where they really shine. They sort of cut through a little more. And it might be due to the 15-inch speaker, which is also another awesome thing. I don't know why Fender don't make more amps with a 15. It just makes sense. So make a Fender Hot Rod Deluxe with a 15. I know heaps of people would want to buy that. I'd like to check that out. But anyway, that's another story. So the Delta Blues is a good amp for blues, rock, anything that you might need 2 channels for, or a good platform for pedals. Just don't expect to get Fender-like reverbs out of it. It's just not going to happen.